This is a comment asking me to speak on enmeshment. Just as a reminder, I'm not a therapist or other professional, so take everything with a grain of salt. I'm happy to try to talk on this, but enmeshment is such a big topic that I feel a little bit bamboozled about what to say or where to go with this. I guess what comes to mind is I think enmeshment is super, super common. And I think part of why that is because there are a lot of different types of trauma or a lot of different parenting styles or whatever that can lead to enmeshment. A lot of my recent videos have been on emotional incest, and I think that emotional incest tends to cause pretty severe enmeshment because the kid learns that mom or dad's needs have to be above mine, and so their own wants and needs tend to get almost completely erased in those dynamics. But I didn't get raised with emotional incest at all, and I feel like I have plenty of enmeshment. It just comes from a different parenting style. Some of the other types of parenting that I think lead to enmeshment would be when a parent has a really specific outline for their kid's life planned out for them. You're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a pastor, or you're going to be a baseball player. Anything like that is the parent not letting the kid figure out who they really are naturally, or not letting them be whatever they want to be naturally. I think authoritarian parenting causes enmeshment because the parent thinks basically that they have all of the power and that the kid's job is to listen to them and to obey them. So what that really means in a lot of cases is it doesn't really matter what you want. You have to do what I want. And so those kids learn to erase themselves and to obey and appease their parents, which is enmeshment. I think families that have a emotionally immature or emotionally explosive, emotionally unpredictable parent tend to have enmeshment because the kids, because of attachment and trying to be liked and loved and to get attention and to avoid abuse and so on, will naturally try to adapt their own behavior as much as possible to help regulate the parent, that they will end up erasing themselves or their own needs and wants in that process. Really anxious parents or parents with their own unresolved trauma, I think, can cause enmeshment in that they might really overreact to their child having negative feelings and feel the need to fix their kid's feelings for them. They're not holding space for their kid to have their own feelings. If a parent feels oh, I know that my kid is going to throw a fit if I don't let them make this mess, so I guess I just have to let them. That is the parent over-identifying with the kid and with the kid's emotions and not trusting that the kid will be able to handle it, or that they as a parent can help their kid handle that disappointment, and that can so I guess what I'm trying to say is I think actually more often the children enmesh themselves to the parents, but sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes the parent enmeshes themselves to the kid. Things that stand out to me as really strong signs of enmeshment: people pleasing, any questions along the lines of how do I tell this person no without really upsetting them or really hurting them? If you feel responsible for not upsetting people, that's because you've learned that enmeshment is expected. We all have to agree, we can't upset each other, and if we have differing views, that's bad, or conflict avoidance. Struggling to make decisions, especially in a group, if you're with your family and that you somebody or you all somehow decide to order pizza, and it's oh, well, what should we order on it? If you kind of get a little nervous and don't want to say what you would prefer to have on the pizza because you want to know what everybody else thinks first, that's kind of, oh, I can't want what I want. I have to kind of erase what I want in order to agree with everybody else. The group is more important. Or maybe there's one family member that is particularly emotionally volatile, and it's like, well, I don't like pineapple on my pizza, but dad loves Hawaiian pizza, so we have to all pretend we like Hawaiian pizza so that he doesn't have a tantrum. But I guess also just like broader picture, I think the fantasy or the ideal childhood is that a child is born and they are just loved and adored for existing, and they don't have any particular expectations for who or how or what they will be. And they are able to develop their personality and their values and their hobbies and interests and career and sexuality and like every aspect of themselves, their religion, everything based on listening to themselves, exploring the things that they are naturally curious about, and just really being who they are. And not, I have to do XYZ because that's what my family does. I have to do ABC because that's what mom expects of me. I can't do ABC because that would upset dad, and if dad's not happy, nobody's happy. Another thing that comes to mind is I think sometimes enmeshment is like really profound to where somebody really loses their whole identity in trying to please or appease a parent or the family. But it's not always like that. I think some families you might be able to completely explore your career choices without pressure, but you may have been expected to be straight or to be cisgender. So you might not have the ability to be an autonomous human being regarding your gender or your sexuality, or your religion or whatever. Like some families allow individuality in some areas of life but are enmeshed in others. And I guess the final thing on this, and just kind of like thinking about myself, I guess, is I think what's tricky about enmeshment is that because it does come from like the family system, it is a early wound and a developmental wound, like a chronic, complex trauma, that it can be really hard to know who or what or how you would have been if it weren't for the way that you were raised, if you didn't have enmeshment. And I know that sometimes people have kind of this identity crisis once they realize that they have CPTSD, they have complex trauma. That's like, is my whole freaking personality, all of my life choices, is all of it just a trauma response? Or not a trauma response, but is it just an adaptation to trauma? And part of me understands that. Part of me relates to that. And something that I try to come around on is that doesn't make me not exist. That doesn't mean that I'm not still a person, and that parts of me being trauma responses or trauma adaptations doesn't have to mean that I have to hate it all and reject it all. There are parts of me that are very passionate and very curious about certain things, trauma and psychology included, that are certainly because of my own trauma, but I still like them. And so I'm still going to choose to see that as part of my authentic identity, even if that wouldn't have occurred if I didn't have trauma. So I try not to care what parts of me are trauma responses or enmeshment responses, but instead just look at, what do I actually like? What actually brings me joy? What actually makes me feel passionate? Versus what am I just doing because I think I have to do it, or because that's been my only option? And that's kind of how I try to choose what to work on changing and what to keep.